The drip was a familiar rhythm in Dr. Eris Thorne's life, a monotonous, insistent plink-plunk against the chipped plastic bucket strategically placed beneath the perpetually leaking ceiling tile. It was the soundtrack to the Hopewell Community Clinic, a melody of weary perseverance. Inside, the clinic buzzed with a different kind of rhythm. A child coughed, a baby wailed, and the low hum of nervous chatter filled the small waiting room. Eris, a woman in her late 30s whose vibrant energy seemed to defy the dark circles under her eyes, moved with the precise grace of a seasoned surgeon, a skill honed in sterile operating theaters before she'd traded them for this beautiful, chaotic mess. "All right, little warrior," she murmured, gently holding 6-year-old Maya's inhaler. "Deep breath in, hold it, and out. That's it. See? Not so scary." Maya, her small chest heaving less with each breath, offered a weak smile. Her mother, a single parent working 2 jobs, squeezed Eris's hand. "Thank you, Dr. Thorne. We don't know what we'd do without you." Eris smiled, a genuine warmth radiating from her, masking the gnawing worry in her gut. "Just keep up with her meds, Maria, and try to keep her away from those dusty playgrounds." Next up was Mr. Henderson, an elderly man whose cataracts made his eyes cloudy, but whose spirit remained sharp. He leaned heavily on his cane, his weathered face etched with the stories of a lifetime in this struggling neighborhood. "My blood pressure. It's been acting up again, Doc." Aris, ever patient, listened to his heart with her stethoscope, the worn leather of her medical bag, a testament to years of dedicated service. "Let's adjust your dosage, Mr. Henderson. And remember what we talked about. Those walks around the block, even if it's just for 10 minutes. She scribbled a new prescription, her movements efficient and practiced. The clinic, with its peeling paint and mismatched furniture, might have looked ramshackle to an outsider, but to its patients, it was a lifeline, a sanctuary. To Eris, it was her life's work. She had traded a promising career in lucrative surgical specialties for this, the unending struggle of keeping a free community clinic afloat in a neighborhood that felt forgotten by the rest of the city. Her personal savings had dwindled to almost nothing, every spare dime funneled into bandages, medications, and keeping the lights on. She worked 16-hour days, juggling patient care with administrative nightmares, grant applications, and the constant hunt for donations. She was exhausted, body and soul, but the grateful smiles, the renewed health of her patients, and the desperate need in their eyes kept her going. Giving up was not an option. Not yet. Just as she was explaining the importance of proper foot care to a diabetic patient, the clinic door opened and a stern-faced courier entered. He clutched a thick envelope, looking utterly out of place amidst the vibrant murals painted by local kids and the quiet murmur of medical consultations. He walked directly to Eris's small, cluttered desk, ignoring the line of waiting patients. "Dr. Eris Thorne?" he asked, his voice clipped and professional. "That's me," Eris replied, a flicker of apprehension stirring within her. Official-looking mail was rarely good news. He handed her a pristine, thick envelope, embossed with a familiar, stark black logo, Croft Development Group. Her stomach clenched. She signed for it, her hand steady despite the tremor that ran through her. The courier left as silently as he had arrived, leaving behind a heavy silence in the waiting room. Eris opened the envelope, her eyes scanning the legalese. The words seemed to jump out at her, each one a hammer blow. Final eviction notice. Lease termination, demolition. Luxury condominiums, 30 days. Her breath hitched. 30 days. 30 days to pack up years of work. 30 days to find a new location that didn't exist. 30 days to abandon the hundreds of people who relied on Hopewell. Silas Croft. The name was synonymous with aggressive urban redevelopment, towering glass structures, and the systematic erasure of older neighborhoods. He owned the entire block, a fact she'd been aware of, but she'd hoped, prayed, that their nonprofit status and the vital service they provided would buy them more time. She'd been naive. A heavy lump formed in her throat. She looked around at her patients, the worried parents, the frail elderly, the sick children. Where would they go? The nearest hospital was an hour away by public transport, and none of them could afford the co-pays or the long waits in overwhelmed emergency rooms. This wasn't just a clinic. It was their last resort, their only hope. Eris excused herself, her voice a little strained, and retreated to her cramped office, the drip, drip, drip of the leaky ceiling, now sounding like the relentless ticking of a clock. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed. "Karen," she said, her voice tight. It's Eris. Croft just sent the final notice. 30 days. Is there anything at all we can do? Karen, her pro bono lawyer, sounded tired, defeated even. Eris, I've tried everything. Croft's got deep pockets, and he's completely within his legal rights. He owns the building, and your lease is month to month, designed precisely for this kind of scenario. He wants the land, and he's not budging. Legally, we're out of options. I'm so sorry. Eris closed her eyes, fighting back the surge of despair. So that's it then? She whispered. All these years, all these people? Karen's sigh was heavy. I wish I had better news, Eris, I really do. But unless you can find another suitable location and magically transport everything in 30 days, or somehow come up with enough money to buy the building, it's over. Eris hung up the phone, the cold reality settling over her like a shroud. The clinic, her dream, her life's purpose, was about to be extinguished, and there wasn't a single thing she could do to stop it. The drip, drip, drip of the water echoed the quiet thudding of her own breaking heart. The city gala was a world away from Hopewell. Held in the opulent grand ballroom of the Fairmont, it shimmered with crystal chandeliers reflected in the polished marble floors. A symphony orchestra played a soft, classical melody, providing a backdrop to the polite murmur of hundreds of well-heeled guests. Eris Thorne, in a borrowed, slightly ill-fitting black dress that felt like a costume, clutched a glass of lukewarm champagne and felt utterly out of place. She was there out of desperation. A contact from a local charity suggested it might be an opportunity to network, to potentially find a last-minute donor, though the likelihood felt infinitesimally small. Her dislocated shoulder, a souvenir from a particularly aggressive patient last year, gave a phantom ache as she tried to subtly adjust the stiff fabric. Everywhere she looked, there were tailored suits, designer gowns, and the kind of casual wealth that could solve all her clinic's problems with a flick of a wrist. Yet, their conversations revolved around stock portfolios, exotic vacations, and the latest luxury car models. Her attempts to steer conversations towards the pressing healthcare needs of the city's underserved were met with polite nods, glazed eyes, and quick changes of subject. She felt invisible, a ghost haunting a celebration of prosperity she couldn't even begin to comprehend. The guest of honor was the talk of the evening. Julian Vance, the charismatic quarterback for the city's beloved NFL team, the Centurions. The Comet, as he was known, was a national sensation, famous not just for his arm and agility, but for his dazzling smile and meticulously curated public persona. He was everything Eris was not, celebrated, rich, and seemingly untouched by the harsh realities of the world. When Julian finally took the stage, the buzz in the room intensified. He was even more striking in person, tall, broad-shouldered, with an easy confidence that seemed to fill the vast ballroom. He delivered a practiced, eloquent speech about community and giving back, his voice smooth and resonant. He spoke about how the team valued its connection to the city, about the importance of unity. Eris listened, a cynical pang in her chest. Empty words, she thought, from a man who had no idea what real struggle looked like. She found herself standing near the back, by one of the massive velvet curtains that flanked the stage, nursing her drink and trying to muster the energy to make one last attempt at a meaningful connection. Her gaze drifted upwards, towards the elaborate lighting rig suspended high above the stage. It was a dizzying array of spotlights and cables, held aloft by a network of metal scaffolding. Something about it made her uneasy. A cable seemed to be fraying, a bolt looked loose. A tiny, almost imperceptible wobble. Years of working in high-pressure, dangerous environments had honed her observational skills to a razor's edge. Then, it happened. A sharp crack echoed through the vast hall, surprisingly loud even over the orchestral music. It was followed by a sickening groan of metal. The massive light rig, weighing hundreds of pounds, visibly lurched, detaching from one of its main supports. It began to swing, slowly at first, then gaining momentum, directly above Julian Vance, who was in the middle of a sentence, a microphone held to his lips. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few screams pierced the polite atmosphere. People froze, paralyzed by the sudden, terrifying spectacle. Time seemed to slow. Eris saw the rig, saw its trajectory, saw Julian Vance's oblivious face as he gestured emphatically. Her logical brain, the one that managed finances and clinic schedules, screamed danger, run. But another part of her, the primal, instinctual part that had taken over countless times in emergencies, screamed act. There was no thought, no hesitation. She dropped her glass, the crystal shattering on the marble floor unnoticed. With a surge of adrenaline, Eris launched herself forward. "Vance, get down!" she bellowed, her voice raw, cutting through the sudden silence that had fallen upon the room. She reached him in what felt like an eternity but was only a fraction of a second, her good arm outstretched. With every ounce of her remaining strength, she shoved the oblivious quarterback with incredible force, sending him stumbling sideways, off his mark. The next second was a blur of searing pain and a deafening clang. The rig, now falling faster, struck her. Not head-on, thank God, but a brutal, glancing blow across her back and shoulder. She felt a sickening crunch, a white-hot agony that stole her breath. She crumpled to the floor, her vision swimming, the world tilting precariously. Chaos erupted. Screams turned into frantic shouts. People rushed forward, but even as the pain threatened to consume her, Eris's medical training kicked in. She pushed herself up onto her elbows, ignoring the burning in her dislocated shoulder and the throbbing in her head. Her eyes immediately darted to Julian. He lay sprawled on the stage, conscious but clearly dazed, a trickle of blood at his temple. A deep gash had opened just above his eyebrow, and a rapidly forming lump pulsed there. Concussion. Her medical brain screamed for action. "Don't move him," Eris yelled, her voice hoarse, cutting through the mounting panic. "Stay still, Julian. You two, get back. Clear the stage." She was already assessing him, her hands, despite their trembling, checking his neck for spinal injury, her fingers gently probing the lump on his head. "Julian, can you hear me? What's your name? What day is it?" Paramedics, who had been on standby for the high-profile event, were already swarming the stage. Eris, still dizzy, relayed her findings, her voice firm despite the agony radiating through her body. She stayed by his side, directing the initial care, her doctor's instincts overriding every other sensation until the professionals took over, gently placing Julian on a stretcher and wheeling him out amidst a flurry of flashing lights and concerned faces. Only then, with Julian safely removed, did Eris finally allow herself to sink back to the cold marble floor, the adrenaline draining, leaving her weak and trembling, enveloped by the throbbing pain. The emergency room was a cacophony of beeping monitors, hushed commands, and the distant wail of sirens. But for Eris, it felt like a silent, infuriating affront. Julian Vance, the football star, was surrounded by an entourage of doctors in pristine scrubs, his agent, his publicist, and a grim-faced coach. A veritable army. Eris, her borrowed dress torn and bloodied, her face smeared with grime, sat on a gurney in a far corner, largely ignored. A young resident finally approached her, clipboard in hand, looking harried. "All right, ma'am, what brings you in tonight?" he asked, not making eye contact, his gaze fixed on his notes. Eris blinked. "I was involved in the incident at the gala. I pushed Julian Vance out of the way of the falling light rig. I have a probable concussion and my shoulder's dislocated, among other things." The resident's head snapped up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He paused, then gestured vaguely towards the controlled chaos around Vance. "Right. Well, we'll get to you. Dr. Ramsey will be around shortly." Dr. Ramsey, the ER chief, was a man whose ego seemed to precede him like a grand marshal. He finally strode over to Eris, a condescending smirk playing on his lips. "You're the witness to the Vance incident?" he asked, not bothering to hide the dismissive tone in his voice. "He mentioned someone pushed him, said you were quite zealous." Eris bristled. "I'm Dr. Eris Thorne. I'm a physician. I shoved him to prevent a severe head injury, possibly worse. I assessed him on scene. He has a concussion and a laceration to the temple. I suspect a fractured clavicle or a dislocated shoulder for myself from the impact." Dr. Ramsey's smirk widened into a patronizing smile. "Well, bless your heart, ma'am. We appreciate your enthusiasm. But we'll take it from here. We have a highly skilled team on Mr. Vance's case. No need for amateur diagnoses." He turned to a nurse. "Get her checked for those injuries she mentioned, then get her discharged. We need this space." The insult stung more than the physical pain. She wasn't an amateur. She was a doctor who had just saved a life. But in their eyes, she was just some woman who got in the way, a nameless fan. Next came Officer Miller, a bored-looking cop with a receding hairline and a perpetually slumped posture. He barely glanced at her. "Statement, ma'am," he grunted, clicking his pen. "Name, date of birth, what happened?" Eris recounted the event, emphasizing her actions to protect Vance. Officer Miller scribbled perfunctorily, his eyes darting to a news channel playing on a wall-mounted TV showing a breathless reporter outside the hospital. He clearly wasn't listening. So, you saw the rig fall, and you moved the victim? He summarized, his voice flat. He didn't ask how she moved him, or what happened to her in the process. His report would be cursory, a formality. He didn't care about the hero, only the celebrity victim. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a weary PA reset her dislocated shoulder, a blinding, nauseating pain she bit back with a gasp, and wrapped it tightly in a sling. They confirmed a mild concussion, gave her a prescription for painkillers, and told her she could go. No congratulations, no thanks, no recognition. Just a dismissive nod and a demand for her insurance details. Eris, her head pounding, her shoulders screaming, felt utterly drained. She was given a generic pamphlet on concussion protocol and a single taxi voucher. As the taxi crawled through the city, Eris pulled out her phone. Her finger hovered over the news app, a perverse curiosity compelling her to see how the world was reacting. The headline blared. Quarterback Julian Vance in freak excitement, expected to recover. A triumphant photo of Julian, mid-throw, filled the screen. The accompanying article detailed the miraculous escape of the beloved athlete. He's a lucky man, a commentator gushed on a video clip. Protected by some invisible force. Her name was never mentioned. Her sacrifice, completely erased. The taxi dropped her off outside the Hopewell Community Clinic. It was dark and silent, a stark contrast to the glittering gala and the bustling ER. The only light came from a flickering street lamp. She opened the door, the bell above it jangling mournfully. The air inside was cold and stale. The eviction notice, still sitting on her desk, looked menacing in the gloom. Eris sank into her worn office chair, her body aching, her head throbbing. She looked at her sling, then at the invisible name in the news reports. She had saved a life, taken a massive blow, and the world hadn't even noticed. She was just a nameless shadow, her efforts dismissed as zealous, her suffering ignored. And her clinic, the one thing she lived for, was still doomed. The rage, cold and bitter, began to simmer beneath her exhaustion and despair. She felt invisible, forgotten, and profoundly, unfairly alone. The morning light, usually a source of quiet optimism, felt like an interrogation lamp. Eris woke with a splitting headache, her shoulder throbbing in protest with every shift. She swallowed the prescribed painkillers, which seemed to do little more than dull the edges of her misery. The clinic was quiet, patients having been redirected by a handwritten sign on the door, citing temporary closure due to unforeseen circumstances. The real reason was she couldn't physically treat anyone with a dislocated shoulder and a concussion. She was nursing a lukewarm cup of instant coffee when the sleek, black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. Out stepped Silas Croft. He was impeccably dressed, a shark in a three-piece suit, his silver hair slicked back, his smile a thin, predatory slash. He looked exactly like the kind of man who would tear down a community clinic to build luxury condos. Croft sauntered into the clinic, not bothering to knock, his expensive leather shoes clicking loudly on the worn linoleum. He glanced around, his eyes betraying a sneer of distaste at the worn-out furniture and the children's murals. He'd clearly heard about the gala incident. He seemed to know everything. "Dr. Thorne," he said, his voice smooth as oil, but with an underlying current of steel. "I heard about your unfortunate accident. Quite the spectacle. And your shoulder, I see?" His gaze lingered on her sling, a flicker of something that could have been concern, but felt more like calculating assessment. He wasn't here to offer sympathy. He was here to capitalize on her weakness. "Mr. Croft," Eris replied, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. "I imagine you're not here to offer your condolences." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Straight to the point, I like that. No, Dr. Thorne, I'm here to offer you a solution. I saw the news. Your clinic is struggling. You're injured. The eviction notice stands. But I'm a reasonable man." He gestured around the clinic with a dismissive sweep of his hand. "This place, it's not ideal. It's dilapidated. A hazard, really." Eris felt a surge of cold fury. "It serves hundreds of people who have nowhere else to go, Mr. Croft. People you clearly don't care about." His smile didn't falter. "Sentimental attachments are bad for business, Doctor. Look, I'm prepared to offer you a severance package. A generous sum, enough to help you relocate, perhaps even retire comfortably if you're so inclined. Be out by the end of the week. No messy legal battles, no further unpleasantness. Think of it as a golden parachute." His words hung in the air, a thinly veiled threat. He wanted her gone, and he saw her injury, her vulnerability, as the perfect opportunity to expedite the process. "My clinic isn't for sale, Mr. Croft," Eris said, her voice rising in defiance. "And neither are the lives of my patients. I will not abandon them for your luxury condos." Croft's amiable facade cracked. His eyes hardened, glinting with a cold, ruthless ambition. "A pity. I was hoping you'd be pragmatic. In that case, I must warn you, Dr. Thorne, I play to win, and I have the resources to ensure I do. It would be a shame," he purred, his voice dropping, "if the city suddenly found this place wasn't quite up to code, wouldn't it?" He gave her a final, chilling smile, then turned and exited, leaving behind a faint scent of expensive cologne and a palpable aura of menace. Eris watched him go, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. His threat was not idle. Croft always leveraged the system, twisted bureaucracy to his advantage. Less than 2 hours later, the prophecy came true. A battered white van with city building and safety department emblazoned on the side pulled up. Out stepped a stout man in a rumpled uniform, a clipboard clutched in his hand. He introduced himself as Inspector Jenkins, though his demeanor suggested he was more interested in intimidating than inspecting. "Dr. Eris Thorne?" he asked, his voice gruff. His eyes narrowed as he surveyed the clinic. "Received a complaint. Anonymous tip. Unsafe conditions. Structural integrity issues. Questionable hygiene practices." He read from his clipboard with a theatrical flourish, as if each word were a damning indictment. Eris felt a cold dread wash over her. Croft had wasted no time. "This clinic is safe," she argued, trying to keep her voice even. "We adhere to all health regulations. We've passed every inspection for the last 7 years." Inspector Jenkins ignored her, marching straight to the leaky ceiling. "Ah, yes. Water damage. Obvious mold potential," he scribbled furiously. He then pointed to a hairline crack in the wall, so faint Eris had never even noticed it. "Structural integrity compromised. Major violation." He ran a finger over a slightly dusty shelf. "Unsanitary conditions. Health hazard." He looked under a cabinet. "Pest control documentation not immediately visible. Presumed infestation." Each accusation was a meticulously crafted lie. Each violation, a microscopic flaw, exaggerated to the point of absurdity. He demanded to see patient records, questioned the age of her equipment, even chastised her for having a community bulletin board with hand-drawn flyers. The whole interaction was a maddening, infuriating display of bureaucratic bullying, clearly orchestrated by Croft. He finally produced a thick stack of papers, heavily stamped and highlighted. "Multiple violations, Dr. Thorne, serious ones. I'm issuing an immediate notice of unsafe conditions. Fines will be substantial. And based on these findings, I'm recommending the building be condemned until all repairs are made and all violations addressed. You have 24 hours to begin vacating the premises, or the city will send a crew to do it for you, at your expense." He slapped the papers onto her desk with a final, echoing thud. "Consider yourself lucky, Doctor. Most times, we just lock the doors. Have a good day." He turned and walked out, leaving Eris standing amidst the ruins of her life's work, buried under a mountain of fabricated accusations and the crushing weight of systemic corruption. Her sling seemed to weigh a ton, her head throbbed, and the rage that had been simmering now threatened to boil over. Eris Thorne was a fighter. Even with her body aching and her spirit battered, the injustice fueled a desperate resolve. She wasn't just going to roll over and let Croft win. She would fight him, and the rigged system, with every last ounce of her strength. Her first target was Inspector Jenkins. She spent hours on the phone, navigating the labyrinthine automated menus of the city building and safety department. Press 1 for permits, press 2 for inspections, press 3 for complaints. She was shunted from one department to another, each voice on the other end polite but utterly unhelpful, a faceless bureaucracy designed to wear down resistance. "Inspector Jenkins is out of the office," one drone-like voice informed her. "He's in a meeting," said another. "He's on vacation," a third claimed, less than 3 hours after he'd just condemned her clinic. It was a stonewall, impenetrable and infuriating. Each wasted minute felt like a nail in the clinic's coffin. Next, the media. Surely, a story about a heroic doctor whose clinic was being unjustly shut down after saving the city's star athlete would be compelling. She called the local news station, specifically the reporter who had covered the gala with such breathless enthusiasm. "Yes, Miss Jensen. My name is Dr. Eris Thorne. I'm the one who pushed Julian Vance out of the way of the falling light rig. The one you didn't mention. The reporter, Miss Jensen, sounded bored. Ah, yes, the Good Samaritan. Look, Dr. Thorne, we appreciate your efforts, but the story is Vance, his recovery, his triumphant return. That's what the public wants. A struggling clinic in a bad neighborhood? Not exactly prime-time material, I'm afraid. Her voice was dismissive, colder than the official refusal she was delivering. Unless Vance himself makes a statement, there's really no angle for us. Eris hung up, a fresh wave of despair washing over her. Even heroism, it seemed, had to be marketable. Her story, without a celebrity endorsement, was worthless. Word, however, had spread through Hopewell like wildfire. The community knew. They might not have the power of the media or the wealth of a developer, but they had loyalty and love for their doctor. The next morning, Mrs. Rodriguez, a tiny woman who ran the local bakery, arrived with a basket of fresh pan dulce and a thermos of strong coffee. For strength, mija, she said, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. We won't let them take our clinic. Soon, others followed. Mr. Henderson, despite his age, showed up with a bucket and sponge, ready to clean anything. Maria, Maya's mother, brought her 3 older children, armed with brooms and dustpans. A small army of patients and neighbors, though lacking professional skills, offered to help paint, patch, or simply provide moral support. We can fix the crack in the wall, Dr. Thorne, a young man named Jamal, a former patient, declared, holding up a tube of caulk. And I can put up some new shelf paper in the cabinets, make it look clean. Eris watched them, her heart a tangled mess of gratitude and fresh anguish. Their efforts were genuinely heartwarming, a testament to the clinic's impact. But it was a futile gesture against the Goliath they faced. A fresh coat of paint wouldn't appease Inspector Jenkins or Silas Croft. Caulk wouldn't fix the structural integrity issues. Their fierce loyalty, though a balm to her soul, felt heartbreakingly small against the giant machine designed to crush her. She tried to explain. Guys, I appreciate this more than words can say, but it's not enough. They're not looking for actual problems, they're looking for reasons to shut us down. Croft wants this land. But they refused to give up. They worked diligently, humming old tunes, trying to bring a sense of order to the clinic. Eris moved among them, offering what guidance she could, her one good arm aching from even the lightest tasks. For a few hours, the clinic felt alive with hope again, a flickering candle against the approaching darkness. Then, the final, crushing blow arrived. A legal courier, this time from Croft's lawyers, delivered an official document. It was a court order, based on Inspector Jenkins's findings and Croft's aggressive legal maneuvers. It mandated immediate vacation of the premises. You have 48 hours to fully vacate the Hopewell Community Clinic. Failure to comply will result in forced removal by the Sheriff's Department, and all remaining contents will be seized and disposed of at the property owner's discretion, with all associated costs billed to Dr. Eris Thorne. 48 hours. The 2 days melted into nothing. The small improvements her community had made now felt like a cruel joke. Her funds were gone, drained by legal fees and failed attempts to find an alternative location. Her body, already pushed to its limits, now screamed in agony. Her spirit, usually unyielding, finally buckled. As the sun began to set on the second day, casting long shadows through the now mostly empty clinic, Eris sat alone in her office. The last boxes of medical supplies were packed, ready for storage she couldn't really afford. The waiting room, usually so full of life and hope, was stark and silent, save for the incessant, mocking drip from the ceiling. She looked at the little painting Maya had given her, a stick-figure doctor with a huge, smiling face. A tear tracked a path through the grime on her cheek. She had failed them. Failed her patients, failed her community, failed her own dream. She wasn't a fighter anymore. She was just a woman, broken and defeated, the weight of the world finally too heavy to bear. She closed her eyes, the silent sobs shaking her entire body. The clinic was dead, and with it, a piece of her soul. Julian Vance was restless. Days had blurred into a monotonous cycle of physical therapy, PR meetings, and the relentless boredom of convalescence. His concussion was healing, the gash above his eye fading into a thin red line, but a persistent fog lingered in his mind. He'd seen the news, of course, the adoring headlines, the praise for his resilience. He was a hero, a survivor, but it didn't sit right. He kept having flashes, disjointed and fleeting, a woman's face, etched with fierce determination, a shout, clear as a bell, the sudden, violent shove. a white-hot pain as he hit the stage, then darkness. The official narrative was that he'd been lucky, that he'd stumbled just as the rig fell. But that felt like a lie. He knew deep down that he hadn't stumbled. He'd been moved. "Coach, with all due respect, I need to know what really happened," Julian said one afternoon, his voice tight with frustration. "The PR team keeps spinning this lucky escape story, but I remember someone pushing me. A woman." His coach, a grizzled veteran who saw Julian like a son, looked uncomfortable. "Julian, you took a heavy blow. It's common for memory to be fragmented. Don't worry about it. Focus on getting back on the field." His agent, a slick, perpetually smiling man named Marcus, chimed in. "Exactly. We've got a fantastic narrative here, Julian. America loves a comeback kid. Focus on that. Let us handle the details." Julian slammed his fist lightly on the bed. "No, I need to know. Someone saved my life, and I'm being told it was luck? That's unacceptable." He dismissed them with a wave of his hand, his usually easygoing demeanor replaced by a cold resolve. "Get out, both of you, and send in security. I need them to find something." His head of security, a former Marine named Stone, was a man of few words and immense efficiency. Julian explained his fragmented memories. "Stone, find every piece of amateur footage from that gala. Cell phone videos, security camera feeds, anything that wasn't officially sanctioned. I need to see it, unedited." Stone simply nodded. "On it, sir." Hours later, Stone returned, a tablet in his hand. He played a grainy, shaky video, clearly shot from a guest's phone. It was chaotic, blurry, but then a moment of startling clarity. Julian watched, mesmerized, as the rig began to fall. He saw his own oblivious self on stage, and then a figure appearing from the edge of the frame, a woman in a simple black dress, moving with desperate speed. He watched in stunned silence as she lunged, shoved him hard, and then disappeared beneath the sickening clang of metal. The camera panned wildly, catching a brief glimpse of her crumpled form before everyone rushed to him. It was undeniable. He had not stumbled. He had been thrown clear. A profound sense of awe, followed by a surge of overwhelming shame, washed over Julian. He, the celebrated athlete, the hero of millions, had been so insulated by his fame, so oblivious to his own surroundings, that a complete stranger had risked her life for his, and he hadn't even acknowledged it. He'd been spoon-fed a narrative, and he'd accepted it, basking in the undeserved glow of luck. "Who is she, Stone?" Julian's voice was barely a whisper, thick with emotion. Stone had already done his homework. "Her name is Dr. Eris Thorne. She's a physician, runs a free community clinic in Hopewell." He paused, then continued, his voice taking on a harder edge. "And her clinic is being evicted, apparently. Developer named Silas Croft claims she's got code violations. City inspector just condemned the place. She's supposed to be out by tomorrow morning." Julian felt a cold, clear rage ignite in his chest, far fiercer than any anger he'd ever felt on the football field. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about profound injustice. A woman saves his life, and the city, the media, the system, not only ignores her sacrifice, but actively works to destroy her life's work? It was abhorrent. He looked at the small, blurry image of Dr. Eris Thorne on the screen, her face a mask of fierce concentration as she pushed him. Her broken body, her struggling clinic, her erased heroism. It was a narrative so twisted, so infuriating, it demanded to be corrected. He sat up, his concussion-induced grogginess completely gone, replaced by a laser-like focus. He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the keypad. He called his coach first, then his agent. His voice was low, intense, and utterly unyielding. "Marcus, cancel everything. Every interview, every appearance. Coach, I need the team. All of them. Linemen, receivers, kickers. I don't care what they're doing. Tell them to meet me at this address." He dictated the Hopewell Community Clinic's address. "Tomorrow, sunrise, and tell them to bring their work clothes and their generosity. We have a debt to repay, a big one." A fire had been lit. The comet was about to show the world that his power extended far beyond the football field, and Dr. Eris Thorne, the invisible hero, was about to get the recognition she deserved. The morning air was thick with the chill of defeat. Eris Thorne moved like a ghost through the Hopewell Community Clinic, her sling a dead weight, her movements stiff with pain and exhaustion. The 48-hour deadline had passed. Any minute, the sheriff's deputies would arrive, sent by Silas Croft, to officially remove her and whatever paltry belongings remained. She clutched a worn photo of her parents, founders of the original, smaller clinic in a different era, her last personal item. She had failed them, failed everyone. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, the final box in her good arm, the sight that greeted her made her pause, her breath catching in her throat. A fleet of black, unmarked SUVs, followed by several commercial construction trucks, lined the entire street, completely blocking traffic. It was an unprecedented sight in this quiet, forgotten corner of the city. The doors of the SUVs opened almost simultaneously, and out poured a veritable army. Not a hostile one, but one that made her eyes widen in disbelief. Linemen, their massive frames unmistakable even in casual clothes, emerged. Receivers, agile and focused. Kickers, recognizable even from a distance. The entire Centurions team, dozens of them, all in rugged workwear, spilled onto the street, filling the air with a sudden, vibrant energy. Leading them, his head still partially bandaged but his eyes clear and resolute, was Julian Vance. The Comet walked directly towards her, his presence radiating a quiet authority that transcended his celebrity. Eris froze, the box slipping slightly in her grasp. She hadn't seen him since that night, hadn't expected to ever see him again. The last thing she'd anticipated was this. Julian stopped just feet away, his gaze direct, intense, and full of something she couldn't quite decipher. "Dr. Thorne," he said, his voice deep and sincere. "My name is Julian Vance. I believe I owe you my life." Eris could only stare, speechless. He remembered. He knew. Before she could form a reply, another vehicle pulled up with a screech. A sleek, expensive sedan. Out stepped Silas Croft, his face a mask of triumphant glee. Behind him were two grim-faced sheriff's deputies, clipboards in hand. He hadn't bothered to hide his excitement at finally driving Eris out. "Ah, Dr. Thorne," Croft began, his voice dripping with condescension. "Running a little late, aren't we? As you can see, the city is here to facilitate your departure," he smirked, gesturing to the deputies. Then his eyes fell upon the assembled football team, and his jaw dropped. His triumphant smirk melted into a look of utter bewilderment. "What in God's name?" Croft spluttered, staring at the dozens of hulking athletes. Julian Vance, without taking his eyes off Eris, spoke with a clear, resonant voice that carried across the street. "Mr. Croft, I presume?" Croft, still reeling, managed to stammer. "Yes, that's right, Silas Croft. And you are?" But even as he asked, recognition dawned, and his face paled. Julian finally turned, his gaze cold and unwavering as it met the developers. "I'm Julian Vance. And this," he gestured to the entire Centurions team, "is my family, my team, and we're here to help Dr. Thorne." He paused, his voice dropping slightly, but carrying immense weight. "You see, Mr. Croft, Dr. Thorne saved my life, and in return, you're trying to destroy hers. That doesn't sit well with me, or my team." Just then, another wave of vehicles pulled up. News vans, their satellite dishes gleaming, their logos instantly recognizable. Julian's publicist, a formidable woman named Sarah, stepped out, already directing cameramen. She'd made sure the media, who had so eagerly ignored Eris before, wouldn't miss this. Flashing lights began to pop, microphones were shoved forward, and a swarm of reporters converged on the scene. Croft's face was a study in horror. His carefully orchestrated eviction had become a national spectacle. The cameras weren't on him, the triumphant developer. They were on Julian Vance, the football hero, and his team, standing in solidarity with the quiet, injured doctor. "This is completely unacceptable," Croft blustered, trying to regain control, but his voice was trembling. "These are city orders, health violations, unsafe conditions." Julian simply raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? Because what I see, Mr. Croft, is a doctor who risked everything for others, and a system that tried to crush her for it. But not today." He stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Eris's good shoulder. "Not on my watch." The news cameras zoomed in, capturing every word, every nuance. The sheriff's deputies, suddenly finding themselves in the glare of national media, looked deeply uncomfortable. One of them, a stout, red-faced man, actually recognized Eris. "Dr. Thorne, is this true?" Eris, her voice thick with emotion, finally found her words. "I tried to tell your colleague, Officer Miller, about what happened. He didn't seem interested." The deputy shifted nervously. Croft, realizing he was outmatched, outmaneuvered, and about to become the villain in a national news story, sputtered a few more threats, but they died in his throat. He threw his hands up in exasperation, shot a venomous glare at Eris and Julian, and stomped back to his car, his legal victory turning to ashes in his mouth. The deputies, sensing the shift in power, quickly retreated, their initial mission abandoned. Julian turned back to Eris, a warm, genuine smile now replacing his stern expression. "So, Dr. Thorne," he said, gesturing to his team, who were already starting to unload tools from the construction trucks. "What needs to be done first?" Eris looked from Julian to the dozens of determined faces of the Centurions, then back at her clinic, the sun now illuminating the leaky ceiling and the cracked walls. A tear, not of sorrow but of profound relief and gratitude, traced a path down her cheek. I think we start with that leaky roof." What followed was nothing short of a miracle. The Centurions, true to their word, descended upon the Hopewell Community Clinic like a benevolent storm. They weren't just posing for cameras, they were working. Huge linemen, accustomed to smashing through defensive lines, were now expertly demolishing old walls, their muscles rippling as they wielded sledgehammers. Receivers, known for their precision catches, were carefully installing new wiring, guided by professional electricians Julian had hired. Kickers, usually focused on field goals, were meticulously painting walls, their hands steady, their focus absolute. Julian Vance, despite his recovering concussion, was everywhere, directing traffic, fetching supplies, and occasionally, with a sheepish grin, attempting to help install a new plumbing fixture. He'd brought in top-tier contractors, architects and designers, all paid for by his burgeoning foundation, all committed to transforming the clinic into a state-of-the-art facility. The news, which had so dismissively ignored Eris before, now couldn't get enough of the story. "NFL star renovates hero doctor's clinic," blared headlines across every major network. Eris, initially uncomfortable with the spotlight, found herself giving interviews, her quiet strength and unwavering dedication finally brought to the forefront. Donations poured in from all over the country, from individual citizens inspired by her story to major corporations eager to align themselves with Julian Vance's act of profound gratitude. The transformation was astonishing. The leaky ceiling was replaced with a sturdy new roof. The cracked walls were rebuilt, freshly painted in cheerful, calming colors. State-of-the-art medical equipment, from new examination tables to advanced diagnostic tools, filled the expanded rooms. The clinic, once a symbol of struggle, was now a beacon of hope, its future secured for decades to come, thanks to the overwhelming generosity sparked by Julian's intervention. Even the antagonists made an appearance, though under very different circumstances. Officer Miller, the dismissive cop from the ER, was now awkwardly directing traffic outside the renovated clinic, part of the extra security detail for the grand reopening. He offered Eris a sheepish, mumbled apology for his previous oversight, his gaze avoiding hers. Dr. Ramsey, the condescending ER chief, was also there, looking uncomfortable but eager to be seen in the background of news photos, suddenly claiming a long-standing admiration for Dr. Thorne's work. Eris simply nodded, her smile polite but distant. True justice wasn't about public shaming. It was about genuine change. The grand reopening was a celebration unlike anything Hopewell had ever seen. Hundreds of people, patients, community leaders, politicians, and fans gathered outside the sparkling new clinic. A gleaming plaque near the entrance read, "The Thorne Vance Hopewell Community Clinic, dedicated to selfless service and the power of a grateful heart." Eris, her shoulder fully healed, stood beside Julian, a genuine, radiant smile illuminating her face. He was no longer just a benefactor. He had become a true friend, a trusted ally. He'd even joined the board of the clinic's new foundation, committed to its long-term success. She looked at the cheering crowd, at the faces of her patients. Maya, now breathing easily, Mr. Henderson, walking a little straighter. She looked at the gleaming interior of her clinic, a place of dignity and cutting-edge care, not just survival. The weight that had crushed her for so long was gone, replaced by an exhilarating sense of triumph. Her dream, almost extinguished, had been reborn, stronger and brighter than she could have ever imagined. As they stepped forward to cut the ceremonial ribbon, Julian leaned in, his voice soft. "You know, Doc," he said, "I thought I was the one who was lucky that night. Turns out I was even luckier to find you." Eris smiled, her eyes glistening. "The luck, Julian," she replied, squeezing his arm, "was all ours." She took the oversized scissors, and together they cut the ribbon, opening a new chapter for Hopewell, for the clinic, and for the quiet doctor who had shielded a star athlete, only to have a star athlete shield her in return. The ultimate payback wasn't revenge, it was the restoration of hope, built brick by a community and a team that refused to let a good heart fall.